A brand new adventure awaits as we take on killer robots, uncover a sinister plot, and tap into superhuman abilities. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're diving into Atomic Heart, a brand new first-person shooter, to find out if it's worth your time. It's no use burying the lead here, so I'll be straight with you all. It is incredibly hard to believe Atomic Heart is the very first game from Mundfish. They're a Cyprus-based game development studio with over 130 creatives across 10 countries, and frankly, the diversity of talent seems to have paid off in a big way. The level of quality that oozes from this ambitious project is nothing short of impressive, and it's not often we're so upfront about this sort of thing when it comes to our reviews. But before we do get ahead of ourselves, let's dive in to what exactly makes Atomic Heart beat. Set in an alternate retro-future version of the 1950s USSR, Professor Sechnov, a brilliant scientist, inventor of an omnipotent substance known as the polymer, a fringe technology that aimed to power the technology of tomorrow. As a result, the Soviet Union was propelled to new heights in science, robotics, and AI. This resulted in an explosive economic growth that established the USSR as the leading global power, allowing the country to quickly recover and flourish after World War II. Sechnov then proceeds to announce the upcoming launch of a polymer-powered neural network known as the Collective that aims to allow people to control robots simply with their minds, giving humanity the ability to instantly access the world's knowledge on demand. Fast forward to today, our character and prodigy to Sechnov, Major Sergei Nechayev, an elite KGB agent and war veteran codenamed P3, arrives just days before the grand unveiling, where an incident happens at facility number 3826 that sends robots and various top-secret experiments into a killing frenzy. Your job is to find out what exactly went wrong. Throughout your investigation, you're paired with a talking polymeric glove that provides P3 with near superhuman-like abilities, such as the ability to cast chain lightning, freeze enemies at will, and even invoke telekinetic powers to manipulate enemies and environmental objects alike. Now, I'm sure you're hearing about this sentient glove and potentially drawing immediate comparisons to the game Forspoken, recently released this year. But thankfully, I'm pleased to report the writing in this game is leagues better than the writing in Forspoken. The dialogue is witty and at times downright complex, and the jokes and language land nearly every time.
Great, let's go.
Assuming you have purchased a ticket.
A ticket? A ticket? Are you stupid? There are corpses everywhere. There's an emergency protocol in effect over the entire facility. Start the train right now.
According to Soviet law, free travel is available only to pregnant women and people with disabilities. I do not detect any signs of pregnancy.
Now, after everything breaks down, you're put on your heels heading deep underground into facility number 3826 to find out what the hell actually happened. You'll encounter puzzles, both large and small, lengthy combat sections, as well as both elite and boss encounters that will test your constantly evolving combat chops. I'm sure a lot of players are wondering if Atomic Heart is open world. The short answer is kind of. There is a sprawling world map, complete with cars to drive and littered with various points of interest and enemies to fight. There are even hidden dungeons called polygons or test rooms that offer unique encounters and interesting rewards outside of the main story loop. The game, however, has a very clear and specific plan for you. Heading to massive underground facilities one after another makes the open world act more like a container for these larger set pieces. Now, will taking your time in the open world between core missions help you beef up your weapons and skills? Of course, but you can also just beeline it from point A to point B and rarely miss anything of note. The open world does, however, function as a place to really go buck wild with your weapons and abilities, since destroying anything will see repair bots gradually swarm the location, restoring whatever you end up killing. It's a clever way to keep the world full of combat encounters, while also contributing to the overwhelming feeling of just how dire the situation has become. It makes the tide of killer robots actually feel unstoppable. Fans of both the Bioshock and Fallout series will feel right at home here in Atomic Heart, and after years of no games filling that void, Atomic Heart manages to capture that same essence, but in a completely new way. If anything, I'd say this game actually aligns more closely with Bioshock than something like Fallout. Everywhere you go and everything you do in the world will have you not only questioning what is really going on, but also give you that uneasy vibe of always needing to look over your shoulder or take a corner slowly, something I haven't felt since Bioshock. Now, like that game, specifically Bioshock Infinite, everything starts off as this beautiful utopia, and without so much as a warning, things descend into total chaos. You'll have a handful of unique weapons to craft and wield, special abilities to learn, all the while trying to figure out what the hell went wrong. Sounds familiar, right? Where this game largely differs from Bioshock is in its combat. Bioshock, through all its games, still felt incredibly arcadey. Atomic Heart, on the other hand, is all about pacing and planning. Do you have the right set of skills for the next puzzle? How about the right weapons for the enemies ahead? Is your inventory even prepared for the next string of potential encounters? You'll find yourself asking all of these questions and more, and it's a huge part of this game. You have to make choices via a limited inventory system that dictate just how many weapons you bring into battle, how much ammo you need before you run out, and even how much health you can restore before one bad dodge results in death. Then we get to the difficulty in Atomic Heart. On the highest difficulty, Armageddon, robots will nearly one-shot you, and your reaction time and preparation will 1000% be put to the test. You will die, a lot, and you'll need to plan exactly how you're going to tackle each encounter. Because of how the save system works in Atomic Heart, existing only in physical locations that house a telephone in either recreation rooms underground or sparsely scattered throughout the open world, getting stuck within an encounter can become a very real thing, as it happened to me multiple times because of poor resources used in a panic. Those 4 shotgun shells I had left had to be used at just the right moment to secure the victory I needed to progress, and let me tell you, these fights can be a real pain in the ass. Let's first talk about the flow of combat in Atomic Heart, as it will provide valuable context for everything else to come. As I just mentioned, combat is a methodical process. You can't block attacks, at least not without equipping a very specific skill. Instead, dodging, evading, and even utilizing the environment to avoid enemy attacks is a main focus. Dodging at a base level is a limited resource on a short cooldown, and things like iframes and additional dodge charges are all things you need to actually invest upgrades into. This means, kind of like a Souls-like, you'll need to encounter enemies enough times until you really learn their attack patterns. The enemies have both non-telegraphed and blatantly telegraphed attacks, the latter for good reason, as these can not only knock you on your ass most of the time, leaving you susceptible to follow-up moves, but also deal massive damage, often one-shotting you on the hardest difficulty. You'll also have to manage an energy system. By engaging in melee combat, each strike will see you accumulate energy. Ranged weapons that utilize this resource can then consume it to dish out their attacks. Mixing melee and energy-using weapons in combat can effectively ensure you always have a way to deal with a threat at range when you're otherwise out of physical ammo. Finally, through your ability to scan the environment and enemies alike, you'll be able to identify an opponent's resistances and weaknesses, which directly influence how you can approach them. Again, entirely dependent on what you brought with you. It's honestly one of the most fluid and rewarding combat systems we've experienced in a game like this to date, and that's saying something. The enemies in Atomic Heart are easily one of the game's highlights. The sheer level of pathing and combat animation that went into every single enemy in the game is alone impressive. In order not to spoil numerous enemies you'll encounter as you progress through the game, we're going to keep this to a select few, ones you'll encounter in pretty much every situation, but just know there are plenty more to encounter on the road ahead. Lab techs are probably the most plentiful enemy you'll encounter in Atomic Heart. They're the humanoid ones with that awful mustache on their face. These are incredibly aggressive the moment you alert them, often sprinting directly at you and attempting to dropkick you into tomorrow. They have a whole host of melee combinations at their disposal, and when in a group, will strategically try to get around you to hit you from different angles. They even intelligently path through the environment, even vertically, to get to you at whatever the cost. In the rare instance you do find a place to cheese them from ranged, be prepared, because nearly every enemy in the game, these included, have some sort of ranged attack for these exact situations. There are even multiple variants of lab techs, such as ones with electrified weapons and polymer shields that are incredibly difficult to take down, dodging and blocking your attacks frequently. There are also laborers, small but plentiful in the world, previously relegated to tasks like refining wood and being part of emergency response teams to cut open vehicles with their large articulated blades. Just like the lab techs, these will also get up in your face, but often rev up their saw blades to launch themselves at you at extremely high speeds. They can even discharge their blades at you, resulting in them fleeing momentarily in order to replenish their blades. Finally, there are engineers. Not all enemies start out hostile, these being a prime example. You can choose to forego engaging them, but you miss out on valuable parts, which are crafting reagents that you can use later on in the game. Engineers quickly switch from rather jolly robots to aggressive, sporadic attacking monstrosities. If you do aggro one of these, be ready for a fight, but you've been warned, these are enemies still very early on in the game. Now, in order to tackle these numerous threats ahead of you, you'll need to craft any number of the 20 unique weapon blueprints you come across within the story. You'll start off with an axe called the Swede as your primary method of dealing with the threats the game has to throw at you. By taking advantage of various upgrades, you can increase its damage and alter its special attack entirely, making it more effective against specific enemy types, and even unlock the ability to slot cartridges, allowing you to infuse the weapon with specific elements. Eventually, you'll unlock progressively bigger and badder weapons, from the tiny electrode sidearm that taps into the glove's energy system to the Fat Boy that I'm sure any heavy weapon enthusiast will love. You even have the KS-23, your classic tech-infused shotgun that has one of the most satisfying kick and feedback loops I've ever experienced with a shotgun in a video game. By tapping into the upgrade system, all of the weapons can easily carry you throughout the entire game. It's truly about picking what you love to use and being prepared rather than using what's best, and that's a huge testament to the stellar weapon design. I think it's also important we briefly revisit and expand upon the inventory and crafting system, specifically in regard to the ammo economy. Atomic Heart chooses to employ a classic grid-based inventory system like many older RPGs. Everything takes up a fixed amount of space: weapons, ammo, even healing canisters. All ranged weapons of the kinetic variety obviously consume ammo, and this is the sort of thing that balances their strength. Ammo in Atomic Heart isn't exactly scarce, but it's not something you can just reliably find as you need it. Because of that, you need to plan your inventory wisely, even going so far as to entirely fill yourself up so that you aren't trying to rely on random world loot to give you those few extra rounds to finish off the next encounter. Crafting components, consumables, and even ammo of all varieties are scattered throughout various containers in the world. Looting everything in the world is relatively easy thanks to the fantastical fluid telekinesis your glove can employ. Loot will first look for space in your inventory before being sent back to your storage, the same place you craft, upgrade, and equip everything at that damn over-sexualized upgrade robot. You'll absolutely need to plan out the weapons you're going to take, how much damage of each weapon you'll bring with you, and make sure you leave room to pack canister buffs and healing pods. The great thing about the loot in Atomic Heart is that literally nothing goes to waste. It all can be disassembled for core crafting materials depending on the item. If you find ammo you don't ever use, salvage it. You're getting ammo packs that are below your current combat tier, salvage them. Regretting a weapon investment, you can salvage that too for materials back. Literally nothing goes to waste, fitting for a supposed utopian setting. Finally, I want to talk about skills. You'll have access to 7 full skill trees, 5 of which are active, while the other 2 are passive. 94 skill nodes in total, and thankfully, a good portion of these alter your gameplay. The active ones will give you access to a whole variety of things like chain lightning via shock tree or the ability to mass freeze your enemies with frostbite. Fancy a bit of control? Look no further than mass telekinesis. You can even employ fire or augment other skills by coating enemies in polymer via polymeric jet. You can even bolster your defenses through a polymeric shield skill, which is on the table. On the passive side of things, you can gain access to more dodge charges, gain iframes, boost your health, increase your energy, replenish speed, and a whole lot more. Regardless of what you choose to invest in, you'll only be able to slot 2 active abilities, which is why those elemental canisters I mentioned earlier for your weapons can be so important to cover damage types that you're missing. Thankfully, this is one of the least restrictive systems I've experienced in an RPG, allowing you to entirely refund your skills and retrieve all of the polymers you've spent on those skills without any penalty. This enables free exploration into whatever skill branch works best for you. Regardless of what you choose to invest in, we found every single skill branch to be a blast to use, especially when weaved into combat between your melee and ranged offerings. Moving away from combat, another core highlight of the game are the puzzles and minor activities that populate the environments between all of the major combat encounters. Every major facility that you'll go through will feature a set of core puzzle mechanics that you'll employ from encounter to encounter. These can be as simple as utilizing your telekinesis to move platforms to reach switches and doors, or moving cryo balls through tubes to cool overheating furnaces. It can even be as complex as manipulating magnetic fields to radically transform the platforming space, unlocking new corridors, and even hidden materials. Then you have lockpicking. Yes, you heard me right, lockpicking. Never in our 20+ years of gaming did we think we'd be praising a lockpicking system, but here we are. Honestly, we thought this system had been perfected, but here comes the Atomic Heart devs saying, you know what? Let's make this more fun and interactive. Locks on doors can feature any number of puzzles, like snapping your fingers in alternating sequences to trigger locking mechanics, to rearranging colored dots to perfectly align when rotated. The harder the lock, the more of these puzzles get added in sequence. Seriously, it's absolutely brilliant, and I never found myself getting tired trying to pick that next lock. There are even doors in the game that, in order to unlock the path forward, will have you flipping and moving entire stage scenes, attempting to find and line up holes and platforms just right to allow you to climb around inside. Seriously, this is all for a locked door. Then we get to the open world areas, and here you'll find yourself hacking into the system to hijack cameras, enabling you to turn on devices or open other doors, granting you access to restricted buildings and additional puzzles. One of the core mechanics in that open world is to open doors that allow access to hawks in each area, which directly contribute to keeping your life from being an absolute living nightmare once robots start swarming you. These are floating contraptions that, when overloaded, temporarily disable alarm systems and even various robots in a designated area, opening you up to more freely explore. Just be sure to realize when these come back online. Triggering alert will progressively send more and more deadly robots to your position. Think GTA Wanted levels, but on steroids. Speaking of steroids, let's talk boss fights. I'm going to avoid showing you any of the ones besides a few early mini-bosses and the Hog 7 Hedgie boss that was also featured on IGN a while back. Simply put, these fights are incredibly well paced, and you're forced to lean into everything you've learned, timing your dodges and attacks just right. Even the animations and overall performance of the enemies in these fights is just so over the top that I would sometimes get distracted appreciating just how elaborate their moveset actually is. It's just something I haven't experienced in any other game besides FromSoft titles. Depending on the difficulty that you're playing, these will be hard checks on your combat knowledge, patience, and skills. It's just another positive tick in Atomic Heart's already impressive resume. Now, we wouldn't be doing this review justice if we didn't mention the performance issues we experienced during our time with the game. In terms of computer specs, we ran this on an AMD Ryzen 9 5950X with a Radeon 6800 XT, 32 gigabytes of RAM on an NVMe drive. Upon launching the game, the shader cache has to be compiled, something we've seen more frequently in games due to the sheer amount of fidelity present, and Atomic Heart is certainly included in that list as the game looks fantastic. During that time, and sometimes subsequent times launching the game, we'd get horrible frame stuttering and lag until it was clear those shaders had fully loaded. Only a few times, however, did we actually see a progress bar. We thought this was the end of it, but in various instances during the actual game, we'd experienced large frame drops in what we can only assume was due to the game loading in the open world whenever leaving a building or underground facility, as there are no loading screens within Atomic Heart. We had to go so far as to turn our game resolution down to 1920 by 1080 to get performance to stabilize in multiple situations, especially in fights with numerous enemies engaging at once. I'm hoping this is addressed in either a day one patch or in a future optimization pass, because from what I've heard, next-gen console versions seem to be running much more stable than PC builds, which is a running theme nowadays. Performance issues aside, I didn't experience a single gameplay bug in my entire time with Atomic Heart, and for something of this fidelity and depth, that's pretty damn impressive. If you haven't guessed by now, I would still absolutely say Atomic Heart is worth your time, especially if they get these performance-related issues under control. Between the main story, side quests, and depending on how often you get sidetracked in the open world, you could easily clock 40 hours plus with the title. So there you have it, our review of Atomic Heart. The game is available on February 21st for PC, Xbox Series X, S, and 1, as well as PlayStation 4 and 5. The game does have a few different editions, the Gold Edition giving you access to the Atomic Pass and future DLC. As always, if you found this worth your time review helpful or enjoyable, do me a solid and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. There are so many great games coming out in 2023, and if you're looking for a new take on some of the year's biggest titles, we've got you covered. My name is Cody Atkin from everyone here at Legacy Gaming. Thanks for watching, and play on.